There's a line in the first Matrix movie where Morpheus is trying to explain the world of the Matrix to Neo. He says, "You don't know what it is, but it is there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad." For a long time I lived with that splinter. I called it being a nice guy. I called it not wanting to rock the boat. But eventually, I realized that if you don't rock the boat when it's headed for a waterfall, you're just a polite passenger on a sinking ship. Today, we're talking about bugs and boundaries. We're talking about that functional gap, the space between knowing something is wrong and having the audacity to actually say so. I want to take you back to a middle school hallway, to a high-stakes classroom in the inner city, and to a relationship where I almost sacrificed the most important thing in my life just to keep a honeymoon alive. We're going to talk about why being strong enough to be gentle isn't just a cool quote from the guy who voiced Optimus Prime. It's the only way to build a life that actually belongs to you. This is Rebuilding Rob, and today we are debugging the system. I fucking hated junior high school. That was the great transition of my academic career. Not high school, not even college, but junior high was by far the hardest transition I have ever made in school. This is when the cliques started forming. People were being judged by the way they dressed, by the way that they wore their hair, by the shoes that they wore, and maybe most of all, by who their friends were. I was on the lesser end of the social Darwinism experiment that was junior high. I was soft-spoken. I was quiet. If anything, I was kind of shy. I knew that I wasn't wearing the cool clothes. I felt bunged up in the clothes that I was wearing. And I also felt bunged up in my own skin as well. My self-esteem was non-existent. I was a kid who kept my head down, literally, as I looked at my feet and walked through the halls between classes. For all these reasons, I got left behind as many of my friends and fellow classmates struggled to evolve and adapt. But because I kept my head down, literally, I was also quiet. People assumed that I was passive. Over time, I guess I became passive. I blended into the woodwork and I disappeared. The whole experience took any self-esteem that I might have built up in elementary school and flushed it down the toilet. Oh yeah, and right in the middle of all of these self-esteem issues I was having, trying to understand cliques and the whole social hierarchy that was literally being rewritten on the spot, on top of all that, I was in the throes of puberty. Even if I tried to buy some new clothes, get a new haircut, and pretend to be somebody who I wasn't, nobody would ever buy it. You ever feel like you were in a no-win situation where the only way to get through it is by surviving it? That was my 2 years in junior high. While everyone else was downloading the new social code for junior high, I was still running the elementary school software. I didn't have the boundary update yet. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I kept my head down. And that is where the bug started. The belief that my voice didn't have a place in the room. I didn't stay that kid looking at my feet forever. By the time I hit high school, I'd started to manage. By college, I thought I'd finally outrun that junior high ghost. I found my lane, I got comfortable, and I genuinely believed that the bug in my system had been patched. I was functional. I was fine. So I thought. The problem with getting comfortable is that it's often just a better way of hiding a lack of boundaries. I learned how to navigate the world without rocking the boat, but I still hadn't learned how to build a boat that could actually weather a storm. That storm hit when I moved to South Carolina. I was still relatively newlywed. I was in a new state, and I was teaching in a new school, where my only strategy was to be the nice guy. I wasn't being bullied, the kids weren't brutal, but I was completely in over my head. Because I was so focused on being too nice and avoiding friction in my marriage and in my job, nothing I was doing was working. I wasn't a leader. I was just a passenger hoping the class would run itself. That era was the mirror that showed me that the nice guy software was officially obsolete. Coming back to Michigan wasn't just a move, it was a total system reset. I landed in an inner city classroom where disappearing into the woodwork simply wasn't an option. If I tried the South Carolina nice guy approach there, I would have been eaten alive. I had to change the code. That was my forge. I realized I didn't need to be a hard ass to be respected, but I did have to be strong. I had to embrace the Optimus Prime standard, being strong enough to be gentle. I stopped trying to win people over and started setting firm boundaries. I stopped being passive and started being assertive. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just liked, I was respected. And more importantly, I realized that the respect I earned in that classroom was the same respect I had been failing to give myself for 20 years. I had finally deleted the junior high software and I replaced it with a 100% policy. But here's the thing about a lifelong bug. It doesn't just stay at work. It follows you home. It follows you into your relationships. For years, even after I found my footing in the classroom, I was still accepting breadcrumbs in my personal life. I was still that guy trying to keep the boat steady with X2, even when it meant compromising my history and my own relationship with my own son. My gut, that Morpheus Splinter, was screaming no, but I hadn't fully applied the boundary update to my heart yet. The real change, the option C breakthrough, came when I realized that being strong enough to be gentle meant I didn't have to wait for someone else to change. I didn't have to convince customer service that being a father was a priority, and I didn't have to settle for being unhappy with Jessica. I finally understood that assertiveness isn't about bowling people over. It's about standing in your own truth so firmly that if someone doesn't respect it, you don't even have to argue. You just choose yourself. And you walk away. That is the 100% policy in action. It's the realization that I am the architect of my own peace. The bugs are always going to try to get into the system. Social bullshit, people who push like bulls in a china shop, the breadcrumbers. But now, that boundary is set. The gate is closed. And for the first time in nearly 1,000 days, the boat isn't just steady, it's actually heading where I want it to go. Wow. Once again, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the social Darwinism of a junior high hallway to the high-stakes forge of an inner-city classroom. But it all comes back to that one uncomfortable truth. You are the administrator of your own operating system. If you're sitting there today feeling like that polite passenger on a sinking ship, or if you've been living with that splinter in your mind telling you that something is wrong, but you're too nice to say so, I want you to give yourself the boundary update. Stop running the elementary school software in an adult world. Realize that being strong enough to be gentle isn't about being a doormat. It's about having a spine of steel so that you can afford to have a heart of gold. Remember, and this might be the most important thing I say this entire season of the show, you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that requires you to stay small. I'm going to say that one more time. You do not owe anyone a version of yourself that requires you to stay small. Choose option C. Choose the 100% policy. Because when you finally stop accepting breadcrumbs, you realize that you were always meant for the whole damn feast. And remember that old saying, if they don't give you a seat at the table, then bring your own goddamn chair. I'm Rob, and this is Rebuilding Rob, the podcast. Stop disappearing into the woodwork, start rocking the boat, and for the love of God, have the audacity to speak up this week, even if your voice cracks. Especially if your voice cracks. This episode of Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, was produced, edited, written, and hosted by yours truly, your favorite blogger, a guy named Rob. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I'm well aware that, like me, you have a ton of podcast listening options, so I'm honored that you decided to take a little bit of your time out of your day to spend with me. Rebuilding Rob, the podcast, is available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, you probably figured that out already, or else you wouldn't be listening to me right now. If you're interested in more insight into this perfectly ordinary, non-gun-owning white guy, feel free to check out my blog, rebuildingrob.com. So until next time, this is Rob, reminding you to be audacious, be bold, be brave, be strong enough to be gentle, and remember, the rebuild never ends. Bye, everybody.